Chinese-made cars are taking over Russia, and not all Russians are very happy about it. Ever since a lot of Western car manufacturers left Russia, the Russian market has been absolutely flooded with Chinese cars. And while originally a lot of Russians were pretty excited about getting new cheap functional cars, time has shown some issues. Cars made in China turn out to be just pretty expensive to fix and maintain in Russia. And also, a lot of them simply just don't fit well enough to the Russian climate and weather conditions, with the Russian winter, snow and slush turning a lot of these Chinese cars into complete rust buckets. And right now, the amount of Russians who would rather not buy a Chinese car is increasing quite a lot. Chinese cars in Russia fell off as quick as they caught on, but unfortunately the Russian people don't get much of a choice. Hey there people, it is your boy Roman, your favorite neighborhood Russian. Welcome to a brand new video, and in today's video guys, let's talk about the Chinese takeover of the Russian car market, about how Chinese cars took over Russia and why Russians are not really happy about it. So, why did this happen? I'm pretty sure at this point you guys know the story, right? Right after the start of the war between Russia and Ukraine, a lot of Western companies in general left Russia, kinda took a stance, and Russia essentially became kind of a bit of a pariah in the world. Russia is currently the most sanctioned country in the world. It's in a bit of a new iron curtain, you could say. Many giant corporations like IKEA, McDonald's and so on left Russia, and among them were also car manufacturers. A lot of whom actually even had operating factories in Russia. These brands include Renault and Nissan, who both had factories producing cars in Russia. The Renault factories were actually sold to Russia, and the factories were renamed to Moskvich, or Muscovite, in the name of a old Soviet car brand. So yes, they brought back an old Soviet icon, right? Except that they are actually manufacturing Chinese cars under the brand name Muscovite right now. Chevrolet and Cadillac, Honda and Mazda, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, I mean pretty much every single Western or like Japanese car manufacturer you can think of, all of them left Russia and are no longer actively present in Russia. They no longer send and import their cars into Russia officially. And all of this obviously created a bit of an empty spot in the Russian car market. And even though Russian propaganda is constantly coping and saying that, come on guys, soon enough all these Western brands are gonna return. I mean, essentially like every single week you have a new article on some sort of Russian website about how actually soon enough everybody's gonna return, you guys. Just you wait, it's actually happening. Despite all of this, Russia was actually facing a kind of a shortage of new cars. And as we in Russia like to say, свято место пусто не бывает. Because this massive hole in the market that was there because the Western companies left Russia has instantly been replaced by Chinese-made vehicles. Now I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of Chinese cars. It's a big industry that's rapidly growing. A lot of, these manufacturers that originally started out kind of making knockoffs and copies of existing Western or Japanese car brands and car designs. But things have changed since then. Chinese car manufacturers are taken more seriously now, and look guys, in general, even Western car designs now look like Chinese car designs, okay? So like, it doesn't even matter anymore, right? Like modern car design is just awful and they all look like shit. Это выглядит как китайское говно, типа, сори. Это BMW, блять. And because China and Russia were always friendly, Chinese cars always had a bit of a presence in Russia, but ever since 2022, the amount of Chinese cars in Russia has absolutely exploded. For example, in 2023, Russian media was boasting about how over like almost 2,000 new Chinese car dealerships were open since 2022, so in a year. Chinese brands like Chery, Geely, Chang'an, Omoda, they have been going in hard on the Russian market and opening tons of stores. And you can actually really see it everywhere. I mean, even in my life, I have a friend of mine who actually used to work in a Chinese car dealership, one of the recent ones that were opened after the start of the war. And funnily enough, guys, even my parents have recently just bought one of these Chinese cars that flooded Russia. And I also helped to finance it too, so like... Not even I have escaped the curse of Chinese cars in Russia. But basically, right away after the Chinese cars appeared on the Russian market, they actually started selling and doing pretty well. First of all, obviously due to the fact that the availability of new modern foreign cars on the Russian market has been greatly reduced. And even though there are roundabout ways to get Western cars into Russia, it's not something that a lot of people do. So in general, right now in Russia, you do see less new modern Western cars on the streets. I was actually hanging out with a friend of a friend who came from Russia here to Portugal just for a visit. He currently lives in Russia, and we were walking around the city and he was saying how being here in Europe and Portugal is like an opportunity to see actual new foreign cars that you no longer get to see on Russian roads. On the Russian vehicle market, Chinese cars have to compete with either Russian domestic cars, Russian brands such as Lada or once again Moskvich, which is actually a Chinese brand, but whatever. Or they have to compete with used market foreign cars or parallel imported modern foreign cars that are way too expensive. And this is actually also the reason why Chinese cars initially became pretty popular. With the amount of features and the performance that you get, a lot of these cars were actually a lot cheaper even when compared to Russian domestic manufacturers like Lada. However, it turns out that this cheapness, this low price, may actually come at a cost.
Российские таксисты массово жалуются на китайские автомобили. Списывать машины из Поднебесной приходится вдвое быстрее, чем их корейских и европейских собратьев, а сдавать в автомастерские намного чаще.
При этом ремонт может серьезно затянуться. Запчасти для китайцев едут слишком долго.
Yes, a lot of Chinese cars in Russia turn out to be less reliable than people would like, and they're having a lot of issues.
Китайские машины в московских автосервисах лечат дольше, чем других железных пациентов. Часто владельцы привозят их на ремонт с вышедшими из строя вариаторами, двигателями и дисками. И тогда начинается целый квест. Запчасти порой приходится ждать из Поднебесной больше месяца. Причем их качество остается под вопросом. Особенно страдают от этого таксисты, ведь доля китайских автомобилей в отечественных таксопарках продолжает увеличиваться.
У вас здесь представлено уже много китайских автомобилей. В таксопарке постепенно они смещают других производителей?
Конечно, за 2 года с нулевой отметки мы дошли уже до количества, до соотношения примерно 50%. Это китайские автомобили.
И дальше продолжится рост, да?
Да.
А с чем это связано?
Отсутствие на рынке, в первую очередь, по стоимости интересного предложения от корейских, европейских, японских производителей.
По словам представителей таксопарков, некоторые модели китайских машин списывают уже после 150 тысяч километров пробега.
So yes, basically as far as I understand, what happens a lot in Russia if you buy a Chinese car is that it becomes a bit of a money pit because it's actually very difficult to fix it, to find spare parts. There really isn't like a used market for these cars or anything because these cars, you know, cars these days, and especially Chinese cars, they're basically like smartphones. They're supposed to live 1 year and die. So they actually don't last too long. And also, a lot of these car companies just don't have authorized services, authorized repair places in Russia and so on. So if you have a car from a Chinese manufacturer, getting a good repair job and finding somebody who even knows what to do is already difficult. So
эксперты связывают эту проблему с тем, что модели, которые на нашем рынке предлагает Китай, в основном рассчитаны на домашнюю эксплуатацию с небольшими пробегами. А для такси они фактически непригодны. Пока сложно адаптироваться китайским авто и к российскому климату. Так, электроника у этих машин тяжело переносит суровую зиму. Во время холодов и повышенной влажности она иногда дает сбои, и сенсорный экран не сразу реагирует на нажатие.
And yes, once again, Russia has, you know, pretty harsh weather conditions. We have notoriously cold winters, probably colder than in China, you know. And these cars were just simply not made with Russian conditions and Russian weather and Russian snow, Russian slush in mind, okay? And these cars are basically just not hardcore enough to survive Russian winter. And as a result of this, essentially, when you look up anything about Chinese cars on Russian YouTube, all you see is basically like backlash. Tons of videos of people saying, don't buy Chinese cars. Chinese car after a year of use, really bad. Omoda C5, don't buy this car. A video here about Chinese cars end up becoming rust buckets and essentially rotting as a result of Russian weather. Basically, right now, if you go on the Russian side of the internet and you look up anything regarding cars, people are really hating on Chinese cars right now. And overall, apart from not being happy that the cars are not reliable, a lot of Russians are also not happy about the fact that even though, you know, we're here supposed to be standing up to the West or whatever, showing the West that we can sustain ourselves and be fine without them, without their puny, you know, Rolls Royces and Mercedeses, you know, garbage. Russian people find it extremely ironic that, you know, we're not seeing like a huge increase in patriotism in regards to buying Russian cars. Like Lada, for example, is not going through the roof right now or anything. Nobody's fucking buying Lada, nobody cares anyway, even though there's no Western cars to choose from. And people just find it funny how, you know, we're supposed to be patriotic and, you know, self-sustaining or whatever, and yet we're buying all of our stuff from China. China is overcharging us and selling us cars that don't even work in our conditions, and, you know, it's just a complete joke. And you know, it is quite sad that Russian manufacturers actually cannot step up and make something good enough that Russian people would want to buy it. And apparently Chinese cars are not actually selling too well right now. For example, here's an article about how in 2025, Over a dozen Chinese auto manufacturers will leave the Russian market due to low sales. And during the year 2024, 449 dealerships of Chinese automobile manufacturers all across Russia have been closed, which is a 2.4x increase compared to 2023. So apparently a lot of Chinese car manufacturers are now seeing that this is not exactly too profitable for them, and they're stopping their business with Russia. And I guess it all comes down to the fact that Russian people are just not too excited about Chinese cars anymore. They kind of learned all the pitfalls of it, right? And overall, I guess you could say that the economy is also not doing too great, and not so many people are doing too awesome so that they can make huge expensive purchases like cars. So yes guys, what do we have as a result? Chinese cars took Russia by storm, and then they fell off pretty much as quickly as they caught on. I do think that probably some Chinese manufacturers will kind of hold their foot down and maybe create a better network of like spare parts and stuff in Russia. The situation could improve, and I do think that Chinese cars will continue to exist and being popular in Russia to some degree, right? However, once again, only time will tell what will happen. The real question is, will Western companies and Western car manufacturers come back to Russia and return? And the answer is, once again, who knows, only time will tell. But honestly guys, if they do, right, if Western car manufacturers like BMW, Mercedes, whatever, Japanese manufacturers also, if they all come back to Russia, I know one thing and one thing only: I fully expect Chinese cars to fall off immediately. Immediately, okay? Because the absolute truth is that no Russian would ever prefer to buy a Chinese car when compared to a Japanese or a German or an American one. Because Russians, we just love our Western things too much, okay? I made a whole video about this. And of course, we Russians, we love our BMW and Mercedes. But yeah guys, I guess that is going to be pretty much it for today's video though. I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you guys did it, please make sure to slap the like button on this video. If you want to support me additionally, then go over to the link down in the description, donate to me and buy me a coffee, or become a YouTube channel sponsor. And yeah guys, that's gonna be pretty much it, and I'm gonna see you guys in the next one. Peace.